Sometimes the mechanical connection of things is the most difficult bit. I have purchased this commercial adjustable outboard motor bracket, which will allow me to bolt that to the boat and move this thing up and down about 11 to 13 inches. And my goal here is to get the motor out of the water when I'm not using the boat. So this is the fully up position, and I won't be able to demonstrate the fully down position without putting this on the floor and standing on it and doing a lot of yanking, because it has these two pretty serious springs to help you lift the motor out of the water. Now, my motor is not quite as big as a lot of the outboards this is designed for, so I am thinking about removing one of these two springs to make this guy have a little bit less lifting power. So I just undid this nut so I could slide the bolt that way a bit to get one side off, and then I slipped the other side off. With one spring removed, it's not too difficult to move this thing around and latch it into the 4 positions or 5 positions. Having a little problem with this position here. This is the lowest position down, and my problem is I can get it into that position very easily by pushing this down and moving this bolt. It slides along and it latches into the thing, but I can't get it out of that position. It seems like it's bound, this little bar is bound up in here and won't go any lower. So I can easily give, some slack on that bit, but this bar doesn't seem to want to work. And this is the second time I've gotten stuck in this position, and the last time I had to take the bolt out, and so I thought maybe I'm just doing it wrong. But it doesn't appear that I'm doing it wrong. So either they installed this inner piece backwards, I'm not sure if this hole is the same size as that hole, or the measurements are just off a little bit on this linkage, because I'm having a heck of a time with that last position. All the other positions were great. I'm going to have to take that bolt out again. Alright, so I removed the nut, and when I push it in here, you can see, there's enough tension release that I can easily do that, and I can move this thing around, and this guy goes up and down on the spring. But it seems like it's catching in here, not coming off. And it's really close to where I think it's supposed to be. And you can see with that spring removed, this is kind of a, it's a hefty operation, but you can do it while maneuvering things around. This lever is definitely in the right position because there's a thing for the spring here that's very clearly where the spring catches in there. So it's not a problem with the lever being in the wrong, reversed or something. It's just catching in here and not releasing. So I'm going to hit this little section with a file just to make it where it will release just slightly easier there, hopefully. So you can see here I have it at the second to the last position. Let's see if that filing has helped. And see there it snaps into that last position, but it takes a whole bunch of effort to get it into that last position. I'm not sure I'll be able to get it out again. Yeah, because this lever bar does not want to go down far enough to get that guy out. So I don't know what's wrong with that, but don't expect to be able to use that last position, or if you do, don't expect to be able to get it out. I'm going to hit this thing with a rubber mallet just to see if I'm not pushing it down hard enough or something. The hole of the bolt was going through this corner by quite a bit, and if I grind the corner down a lot, I'm not even certain it's going to latch into the bottom condition. Discounting the last latching position, which I can't get it out of, it looks like I have about 10 inches of potential vertical change with this bracket. Alright, standing on the floor, I was able to get it in and out of that position, but it still wasn't easy, so we're going to give it a little more clearance. this. Let's see. Alright, it still holds in that position. Question is, can I get it out? There we go. Takes more effort. You know, on these guys here, you just kind of lift. This guy there, it clicks in. You have to push this down a little and lift quite robustly to get it out. I suppose it's fine. So yeah, it takes some muscle to move that thing in and out. I was hoping I could rig something up attached to this post so that I could push it up and down from the top of the boat, but I don't think I'm going to be able to do that. I think I'm going to use two hands. Of course, once I get the motor on it and a little bit of weight, that might help. When latched in the last position, the bottom of this guy is about 5 inches below the bottom of the bracket. When it's in the fully up position, this guy here, it's about 9.5 inches from the bottom of that bracket. So that last notch gives you almost 4 inches of extra movement. Right, we're 18 inches from the bottom-most mounting point to the very lowest point on the pontoons. I have a nice pressure-treated 2x4 embedded in the bottom of my deck board on my pontoon boat. But if I wanted to mount this bracket there at the lower edge, I'd have to mount this plate to this bit here, which doesn't turn. And this is the guy up here that allows it to turn inside. So if I want to put the bracket farther up, I can do that, but I'm going to have to mount it to the fiberglass on the back wall of my pontoon boat, which means I'm going to have to reinforce that with probably a big 2x8 pressure-treated piece of wood on the back of that. For mounting this, I have some 304 stainless steel U-bolts. This one here is a little bit bigger than the bottom, but it'll definitely fit there nicely if I want to put it on that guy. And then these guys fit that pretty darn well, so I think that's going to friction hold that. I'm going to be removing the bracket, the mounting plate. Now when you do that, there is this spring that sits in this hole here that latches up to this guy right here to move that up and down. So you will have to put that back in place. These U-bolts I got are not the longest, and they're certainly not going to go through here. I couldn't put a backing plate on anyways because the bracket hits in the back there. But I'm hopeful that I'll be able to get a washer and a nut arm in there, because this doesn't go all the way in. It's, you know, kind of hollowed out. I think I'm going to drill 2 holes on either side of this guy for my first one down here. That will give me the option of maybe putting one of the small ones down here. I'm not sure that one goes through even less far. And then I'll put another big one up further up through something up here. We'll see how it works. Worst case scenario, I have to manufacture some type of a mounting bracket that goes between these two. Alright, right in there looks like it's going to be the best place to get nuts and bolts in without doing any more drilling. If I go farther up here, I'm going to be drilling a hole through and then drilling a big hole through the back just to have access for a nut and a bolt to go onto it. So we'll start with one here, and then we'll see where everything else hits. I'm going to put a washer on the end of each of these, and that'll give me an idea of how close to the sidewalls I can get. So with those washers there, I can move this down to about there and still have those washers get in there. Of course, now marking the holes is a little harder, but I'll just go around the outside of the washers for now, and then later I can use those washers to do the insides, or I can potentially just lift it out and hit it. This is one of those situations where a silver Sharpie is the way to go. Several reviewers online have said that this plastic mounting board is kind of weak and can sometimes crack and break with larger motors. I might reinforce the insides of here with some epoxy and fiberglass later on, but let's see if I can get to fit and kind of work first. So if you're following along, you probably want to leave enough clearance for a socket, not just a washer, because I'm having to tighten these guys a quarter turn at a time here, which works, but a socket would be nice to get in there. Alright, I tightened these screws up enough such that this inner tube will not spin in the outer tube. So apparently I got it too tight, bound up in there. Either I'm attaching to the wrong spot. I'm going to try sliding this down just a little bit and attaching just to the metal tube instead of this gap between the tubes. Okay, that U-bolt is securing the outer shaft pretty well, and I can still turn the inner shaft. So let's get another one mounted up there somewhere. There's really no best place for this top one, so I'm going to get it far enough down from the top edge here when I drill a bigger hole in. It won't take up too much material, but I'm going to be having to drill access holes for the nuts and the washers in here. I'm using a black Sharpie. I'm not sure if I'll even be able to see this black Sharpie when I'm done, but the benefit is other people won't be able to see it when I'm done either, hopefully, because this will be on the outside and visible, so I can't just throw silver Sharpie all over and not expect it to be visible later on. I'm definitely going to have to take this guy to the drill press to make some large holes for the washers and nuts and sockets. And so I'm going to have to unscrew these washers and nuts and push out these bolts and take out everything so I can just drill this guy on the drill press. Alright, this is the socket that I want to use to put on those nuts, and the washer fits perfectly inside of that, and the closest I've found is a 3/4 inch spade bit, which is maybe a little tight there. I think I'd prefer a 7/8, but this is what I have in the shop, so we're going to drill out the back of the holes with this down a ways, hopefully leaving enough material for the nut and the bolt hook into to give me access with this long 13mm socket. I've carefully adjusted the height of my table such that this bit will be above the inside of this guy in here. So I might have to go just slightly lower, but this will give me a good starting point when I'm over here. I'm going to drill through this guy first because it's kind of evenly separated between these 4 holes. This guy here is at the corner of the hole, so I'm worried about the bit trying to drift into that hole. This one here, it might drift into one of these 2 holes. We'll see. It's a drill press, it's not a milling machine, but we're hoping this thing's going to be rigid enough to just go straight down. And this stuff is pretty darn soft, so I'm going to go slow, take it easy, and the point of that bit will go right into the center of my existing hole. Just a little bit messy. Yeah, I think that's going to work just fine, as long as I don't lose this one specific socket. Having a heck of a time getting the nuts started in such a constrained space. Okay. These bolts are not perfectly centered inside of these perfectly fitted holes, and so I tightened that one down. It seemed to squeeze things a bit, and now I can't get this guy back on that one even though I pulled it off of it, and I can't get it on this one to tighten this one down. So if I can get this guy out somehow, I'm going to have to bore these holes out bigger, I think, just so that I'll have a little bit of wiggle room for this socket to move around in. I had a 7/8, I'd be using that instead of the 3/4, but next one up I got is a 1. So we have aligned this as carefully as I can to get it mostly near the center of that hole, and I'm just lucky this is pretty soft stuff here. I've made the decision that this part of my bracket is now permanently attached to the motor, and I will be attaching the bracket to the boat, and then I'll be attaching this rubber clamping plate to the bracket, and if I ever need to take the motor off, I'll be taking off these 4 guys instead of those 4 guys, because these are going to be a lot easier to get access to. I put this bracket onto that clamping plate just so I could measure everything and know where to put this bracket on the boat. And man, let me tell you, putting these 4 bolts through was a lot harder than it was needed to be. They didn't quite line up right here. I had to tighten this in really tight to get those close enough and kind of hammer on things and push it around. Just in general, putting the backing plate back onto this guy, plus the spring that's in there, pushing against it, didn't help. So I might take the entire thing off the boat if I need to take the motor off the boat. We'll see how this thing works. It gets heavier and heavier the more parts I'm putting on. Because I have a large wall up here, I'm unable to raise this bracket to the highest setting because this guy hits that guy there. So this is the highest setting I can lock it into and not have this guy be hitting that guy. If you had a boat with, this mounted right there and there's a big opening here, this could come out farther and go higher up. I have a lot of play here where I can lower the motor down on these big U-bolts if I need to. So I've decided to prop this up where I think the water line will be when there's not people sitting on the boat, and stick it up that way. And that will get the motor body out of the water and hopefully this little skeg fin as well. I don't know that for certain, but worst case scenario, I drill a couple holes higher up and move this thing up a little bit, because I'm going to be using these holes and these holes here, so I can go up 2 inches and the bracket will still cover any holes I've put in the boat. So I'm going to start off there and deal with it. When I get into the water I might have to change it, but that's what I'm going to be at. Now this large panel back here is never really meant to be a structural component. I have down here a big old 2x4 behind that one. I was thinking I'd be mounting down here, but I'm mounting up a lot higher. So I'm definitely going to have to put a backing plate that transfers all this load as far to as much of the panel as I can. I'm thinking I'm going to do a 2x6 or 2x8 that touches this top panel and comes all the way up there. And as far as I can get up inside the bench here. And so I'll have a lot of surface area there. On the bracket side, the bracket covers a large area here, so I'm not too worried about this side. But the back side, I really want to reinforce these screws, so I'm using this entire area and transferring the force to the entire area of that panel. I mean, it's only a 50 pound trolling motor, so it's not like I'm doing lots of thrust against this guy, but there is a decent amount of weight hanging out, and so that twisting action, I want to have a big backer panel in there to kind of counteract that twisting action. All of the rest of the work I've done putting a backer board and mounting this thing is going to be down inside the back of the bench seat. So just substitute this video and multiply it by about 100 for what I've been doing. Out of the scrap pile, I found this nicely aged, pressure-treated 2x10. It's just slightly longer than I measured of wanting. I think I want about 25 inches, but it might still fit up against in the inside of the bench seat. So if it fits, I might as well get it tucked into the top of the bench seat there and get support of the top going both directions. So I'm going to climb under and see if I can make this fit in there. If not, I'll figure out how much I need to cut off of it. This guy was almost, but not quite perfectly sized. So that board is sitting on top of my support 2x4 on the back deck board. It goes up, and it's actually wedged into the top of my bench seat here, where it gets narrow about the 1.5 inch narrowness up there. So it will have holes drilled through and be pulled against that back wall based on the bolts that are holding the bracket in. I might put a metal bracket between these two boards and screw them in, and that way it'll keep this board from going up. It'll keep that back of the bench seat anchored down. I was going to anchor through the back of that fiberglass into this thing here, but if I have this guy already bolted to the fiberglass, I might as well just put a bracket here and hold it down that way. And then the weight of the motor is going to be mostly transferred straight down to this support board. And the twisting force is going to be resisted by this bench seat. And since it's touching the back here, I figure there's anything pushing this way, although I don't think it's going to have much force that way, would push against this bench seat this way, but mostly it's going to be going that way. But we have this kind of, almost a box section here. It's three sides of a box section along the top, and it's up in near the top of that. So I figure that's going to be enough support. We'll find out. While I'm drilling out the holes from the opposite side to match up with the holes I drilled, I'm using a reversed clamp to hold it in place. The only danger there is if I drill through that into my clamp, but I believe I have it centered such that any holes will be coming out to either side of them. I think the holes are mostly above that area anyways. So the bolts provided with the bracket are just slightly going to be too short. The question is, how much too short are they? And the answer is just barely. I can see them right there. If I bored these guys out just half an inch deep, I could get some nuts and washers on them. Or I could do the right thing and buy some new bolts that are slightly longer. Okay, these are 5/16 by 18 bolts. They're 304 stainless steel. Carriage bolts of 2.5 inch. So if I got 3.5 inch 5/16 stainless steel 304 carriage bolts, I wouldn't need to bore out that piece of wood. I'd have a little bit of extra strength. There's plenty of room behind the wood for me to get bolts in there. So I'm going to go take a look and see if I can get some of these quickly. Hurricane's on the way, so it got a little more important to tie this back piece down into that pressure-treated 2x4 that's on the deck board that's bolted down. Using 1/4 inch lag bolts that are 2 inches long with a fender washer. This is all stainless steel. I have this big wind-catching opening right here. That should be slightly better. Alright, if that guy moves, I've got bigger issues than just the boat moving in the wind. The motor's mounted, and I can move it up and down from inside the boat, so that's good. It's hitting the concrete right now. I have one more notch that I can go down, so I have about 2 or 3 more inches down I can do. So hopefully that'll get it deep enough into the water. We'll find out. If not, I can always adjust which holes I'm adjusting things on here. And I think it'll be out of the water there, but if not, I can definitely move it up with these holes here. So now I just have to figure out a handle to turn this guy from up here.